It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Today, we will have an AFL review, round 11. And I don't think I'm jumping too far to call this Upset City, as the upsets flew through here in round 11. So let's get to talking some footy. Joining me today, a great friend of the podcast and somebody I have wanted to work with for very, very long, half of Americans watching the Footy Podcast out of California, Mr. Ben Castle. Ben, thank you for joining me, sir.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Benjamin Castle here in the San Francisco suburbs, and yeah, Ethan and I, my older brother, started our podcast beginning of last year. Our round 11 preview was our 100th episode, and yeah, we started watching the footy in 2020. We discovered it in round one as nearly everything else was shut down, and back then the West Coast Eagles were actually something exciting to watch.
Well, it's always interesting to hear the stories, and I know this podcast really was a little bit of a benefit of that same particular time period with Ross and I connecting through my running of the Des Moines Roosters, and then we had the great show that was on here of why you should watch the footy, which is probably our most popular video. So if you get a chance, if you have not seen that, go back. A little old, you'll see that it's not as good. The microphone quality maybe just a little bit lacking, but it was an incredible conversation that I had with our producer Ross, who has bequeathed the channel to me now. But I think, sir, instead of let's jump into it, round 11, as I said, upset city, so many upsets. I will raise my hand. I was 1-5 after the first 6 games because I couldn't tip for anything, and I don't think I'm the only one. So, thoughts on round 11 besides the fact that upsets ruled this round?
Oh, I was also 1-5. In fact, I was 0-5 because that Cats game went, yeah, the Cats game, and then the Suns Bulldogs game went final before Eagles and Essendon. I ended up tipping, I think, just three correct this round. So much for that minimum five comp.
Well, I will raise my hand. I actually did somehow pull out the last four of the round. I tipped Adelaide over Brisbane, which I know some people thought I was a little bit crazy, but I just had this feeling that Brisbane leave the GABA and things kind of change. But let's discuss that a little bit. Let's jump into each of the games because there's a lot to digest in this round. The first one, everybody knows I am an unabashed Swans fan, but it is hard not to be happy after an incredible start, and conveniently my phone decides to die right now. So Ethan, I just need your help just a little bit while I work on this
Benjamin,
score.
that is.
The score of the game, for some weird reason, my phone decides to go, hey, I don't like your internet. This is what live podcasting does for you.
I got it.
This
Yeah, I've got my notes up for my show, and we're gonna record later. So it was Sydney 11-11-77 defeating Carlton 6-15-51.
So my thought to you, and I'll let you kind of go through it a little bit, is your thoughts on this, because I know this was the talk of every talk show for the next 12 hours in Melbourne, because Carlton fans proverbially lost their minds going up to Sydney. They were told all week Sydney has no back line. This is a perfect setup game for Carlton to get the win, and Lewis Melican comes in with a little bit more size for the Swans, and Nick Blakey goes bunta and has himself an incredibly great game, and the Swans pull out a nice little victory, and Carlton are left licking their wounds now, knowing potentially their season could already be over in round 11.
I'm calling it over. I am. Um, I think they dug themselves too big a hole at this point, and yeah, Melican was the piece that I've been waiting to see him this year. We've seen him having good performances in the reserves. Was talked about, those in the mix articles nearly every week. Finally gets his chance, and the Swans just needed a presence like that, a tall, capable mark in defense with Rampy and the McCartan brothers out, because more than anything, that freed up Blakey to be his normal running lizard self through half back. And when he gets the ball and has that ability to run, good things tend to happen. We saw that so much last year when the Swans were able to stay healthy. And now they've figured out a way to move around enough magnets to allow him to still play that role. You saw, how difficult it was for him when Mills went out early against the Dockers and he had to fall back. So Melican had him covered there. And the Blues just didn't have a similar accelerator. I was thinking maybe they could have slid Sam Doherty a bit back to do that. Adam Sod is very sure by foot, but he wasn't able to get into the game as much. And I know the commentators were criticizing that he wasn't getting the pill as much. So where do you see that for the Blues? That sort of accelerator that they need.
See, and I think they have it. They have Doherty and they have Sod, but I agree. Like I was watching some of the shows and they really did kind of. I know David King on First Crack really pointed it out that several times they would ignore Sod on the run to maybe some shorter options to bomb it to Mackay and to Kerno. And by then the Swans had two or three deep. So they've got one person to body contact, either a Harry Mackay or Kerno, and then one to come over the top with the spoil. And then when the ball hits the ground, instantly it's a Swans advantage because the Swans defensive line was faster overall than the Carlton forward line. So it was just everything that Carlton could do to mess themselves up, they did. They bombed it long to disadvantage. They bombed it long to guys that were not ready for it, or they bombed it into absolutely no way it was going to be marked. And then when they did mark the ball, which wasn't very often, they were wayward. I mean, what was it? Kerno and Mackay, I think, were a combined one goal six for the game. That doesn't help. So it really kind of they were shooting themselves in the foot multiple times and then wondering why they had bullet holes in their feet. I mean, that was really how it went. And then the midfield, you started seeing Chad Warner get going, roll bottom playing a good defensive role. Lukey Parker with his stitched up face, already stitched up face, and continues to put his head over the footy. And then the unselfishness of Buddy Franklin to still kind of, though he was guarded by Jacob Wiedering, and you could tell every time they bombed it to him, Wiedering was finding a way to beat him. But once he kind of became the decoy and stopped trying to go for marks and kind of let the Heenies, the Papleys kind of run it, and then him be kind of off ball. He started to kind of open up, and then he had that one. He could have pinged it from 45. He could have. Nope. He finds Wicks top of in the center corridor, 30 out for a goal. So the one thing that I get on people when it comes to Buddy Franklin is I know he wants to win. Everything that I'm seeing, conversations with him, he's not worried about the records. He's gonna pass Doug Waite. He's going to. It's gonna
He's
happen.
tied with him. He
Exactly.
won't
He's
get any
he's
higher.
going to pass him at his next goal. He wants to get to the finals. He wants a chance at one more flag. Okay. He wants a chance to repay the Swans for having the face to bring him up there. Whether how that was done, whether the AFL was happy about it or not, I'm not going to get into that. But I think Buddy Franklin has been a wonder for the Swans, for the club, and I think he's embraced the Swans, the culture and everything like that. He's been a great soldier for it. I do believe this is his last year. I think he walks away. I think he's done, and there is nothing wrong with that. There is not a single Swans fan that is going to be upset if he does. So in all, as a Swans fan, I'm happy. Is this the win that I think the Swans needed? Absolutely. They get a bye week. It sounds like Dane Rampy will be back after the bye, which every Swans fan is going, thank you so much, because that relieves a little bit of pressure off of Blakey, off of Lloyd, and off of Aaron Francis, who have kind of had to be those key defenders that they've missed with both McCartans and him out.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I hope Melican continues to get games for the time being with the showing that he put up. Should note that Luke Parker was suspended a game for, I believe, a dangerous
Mm-hmm.
tackle, and I would assume the Swans are going to challenge that.
It
I believe it
wasn't.
was a tackle of Sam Walsh.
Yep, it was this. It was the Sam Walsh tackle. It wasn't a second action. Walsh stays in the game, so I think they've got some arguments there.
The,
Uh,
the difficulty though is that I
yep.
don't no dangerous tackle suspension has been turned over or
Mm-hmm.
even lowered all year. Even the ridiculous 2-game one to Will Day
Mm-hmm.
from I think
Yeah.
that was Easter Monday.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about that. I'm again, I understand the AFL trying to stamp out these dangerous tackles, trying to stamp out because of the concussion protocols. I If he does, he does. It will hurt, But the best part is it'll be coming off a bye round. So if they know it's not going to, they'll have a full week to be able to kind of put a plan in together. And you're playing St. Kilda, who I think could be ripe for a win because it's not like St. Kilda has the dominant midfielder bull like say a Carlton or a Melbourne, something like that. So we'll have to see. So as much as I'd love to continue to talk the Swans, there's so many more games to go, including this cracking game that as I watched this game, I was in awe of this one. As the Hawthorn Hawks, 17th on the ladder, get a 10-point win over Rossi Lions, St. Kilda Saints. And there was a smile. I know that there's been a little bit of a rivalry between Hawthorn and Sydney over those 05, 06 years and some of those I mean over the 2012, 14, 16, those years there where they were always seeming to play each other in big finals. I'm happy for the Hawks because I think Sammy Mitchell's abilities as a coach kind of showed there is he's got a young group. It's gonna take some time to get them going, but once they get going, there's a ton of talent on this Hawks side.
Yeah, I mean, hell, Ethan was saying that he sang along to "We're a Happy Team" in Hawthorne after this game. That's the Cats member talking there.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I get that I have things that, and I get that maybe I shouldn't be as much of a fan of Hawthorne because of the, I forget which grand final it was. I think it was 2015 that the Hawks beat
Yep.
West Coast. Yeah, again, I only started watching in 2020, became an Eagles fan in 21, so I'm a little past that flag era, and the one that I really recognized was the friction with Collingwood, obviously. But we've been backing in Hawthorne throughout this whole process, and we knew that they'd been going about it the right way. Ethan and I had been saying for a while, you don't want to max out at maybe being able to sneak into finals in one of those bottom two spots where you got to play away for all three finals. You want to sit back for a couple years, get your younger group to develop together, and then really make a run for it. Obviously, you have Jai Newcomb and Will Day and a couple others who are already emerging there. Another good game out of Josh Weddle, who was last round's Rising Star nominee. But yeah, Mitchell is using his pieces the right way, and they still weren't completely healthy for this one. I believe Chankworth Jath was still
Mhm.
out, and he's a player that Ethan and I are both huge fans of. But they found a groove. Sam Butler coming in against his brother Dan did some nice things, was one of the better games out of Lockie Bramble as well, who's been a fringe player for them. This was a very complete win for them. They were just trying to do some quick math in my head here. Plus 69 disposals, plus 76 uncontested possessions. They controlled the ball for a lot of the game, and the worry was, are they not going to be able to translate that possession time, the dominance in ball control into actually winning the contest? For a while, it looked like their inaccuracy in front of goal was going to cost them, but they managed to get it done in the end. You had the time. You had how many of the final goals did they score? I guess they scored the final.
Both teams had 12 goals. The difference was the behinds with Hawthorn kicking 10 more behinds. So
Yeah, I think they scored the final. They scored the final 4 goals, I believe.
something to that
And
effect.
then you had it was Lewis, McDonald, Moore, Dylan Moore, and then Kaczynski with the winner. They were able to reel it together, find the win in the end, and that's the first time that in those 3 games that they've won that they had to win like that, and that's really promising. And I'm really happy that they're silencing some of the doubters of this plan, and that they're getting the wins that they deserve to get with the effort that they're putting in.
Yeah, and then it also helps when you have an absolutely monster game by James Sicily with 43 disposals. Absolutely monster game by the defender there. Jarman Impey also having a great game with 26 disposals. And when a defender goes forward and kicks goals, it's always a nice thing there. Again, this is this is where we kind of start to do the questions start coming for Rossi Lyon is did he kind of catch lightning in a bottle early in the season because he had a bunch of youngsters he was playing and he didn't have the experienced guys? Now the experienced guys are coming in, and we're starting to see some of the old things that were happening for Ratton the previous years start to kind of bobble up. So I'm fascinated to keep an eye on this Saints team because can they use this bye round to kind of pull everybody together, figure out what was working in the first part, and go back to it. Because if not, it can be another one of those seasons where tons of positivity through the first 10 rounds at Moorabbin, and then you know what happens after the bye. So it'll be fascinating to
Yeah.
keep an eye on the Saints for sure.
So yeah, first 10 rounds, just like last year, 7-3, fifth on the ladder. The new coach smell at this point has worn off, and it's going to take a bit still for Ross Lyon to get all the veterans, I think, playing in the style that he wants. But the slow paced game that he likes and the ball control in the defensive half that he desires can at times leave them exposed through the corridor and on the back end. So that's something that he'll need to address. And Jack Higgins was very inconsistent in this game when he'd been a stronger performer early on. I don't know if, I mean, they're obviously still in the finals hunt. They're still in the eight as it stands, but I think we're starting to see more of what St. Kilda actually are this season, these past few rounds. And I think it took the league a bit of time to catch up to what Ross Ball was like again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now it's going to be more realistic coming up for them. They do have the bye coming up, so they'll be able to figure some things out there, I would assume. Then, yeah, they have the Swans round
Yep.
13
Thursday
on the
night.
Thursday nighter. And
Yep.
then after a free win in Perth, they got what? Did I stutter?
That's funny.
They got actually no, that's a few rounds later, but they got
Mhm.
yeah, it's Sydney out of the bye, then Richmond and Brisbane. And then after that free win in Perth, Melbourne at the Gold Coast. So it's not going to be easy for them, and they're gonna need to reel themselves in. I'm glad that Max King is having better goal kicking form because that was something that everybody was ruining last year. I'm glad that they're getting healthier. Rowan Marshall is still a very dominant player. He's finding a lot of space on the ground, even when he's been the sole ruckman for the first time. I think it was 4 years. That was a big worry that I had about the Saints that Marshall wasn't going to be able to play as freely now that he doesn't have Paddy Ryder with him. But he's still been the Rowan Marshall that we know. So
Yeah.
that's a big positive for them.
Yeah, and he's super talented. I think that last year you started to see Rowan kind of taking the majority of the rucks, and I think it was a slow build for Rowan. I think St. Kilda has actually, though they have changed coaches and a few things, they've actually built Rowan Marshall to be quite a very good ruckman that I think as the years to come, he's going to be up there with the Sean Darcys, with the Luke Jacksons as some of the premier ruckmen in the competition for sure. So since I did mention Luke Jackson, it's a great transition as we go to the MCG as Nam play Wallulup, Fremantle v Melbourne, and Fremantle do it again, round 10 at the MCG, and they
11.
knock off Nam again. I have to admit, I was keeping an eye on this one. It was a late start. It was on FS1, so it was on main TV here in the States. And I have to admit, I fell asleep halfway through the second quarter because it had been a long day because of the early wake up for the Swans the morning before. So this one was difficult. But when I watched the rest of the game later, this was unfortunately Sean Darcy goes out with a hamstring injury, and it's like Luke Jackson just blossoms as he takes over the ruck, and he took it personally that he had Grundy and gone, and there was questions of whether he could do it. What was he, a forward? Was he a ruckman? This was a fantastic game, and this now starts to talk just a lot like last year, where Fremantle is now on everybody's lips about potentially making finals and potentially being a dark horse because if they can keep this up, and again, last year they kind of had their bumps mid late season. Can Fremantle keep it? Because as you said, the West is a difficult travel to go to, and if they can get a home final, making somebody go all the way out to Perth, they got a really good shot of doing some damage. But this is another impressive win over Nam. And now do the questions start on Nam's end just like they did last year?
I think you could see the question starting there. Yeah, thinking back to round 11 last year, that was a game that was defined by injury as well because Stephen May goes out concussed in that one,
Mm-hmm.
and the Dockers take over in the second half to stop the Jake Bowie streak.
Mm-hmm.
It was 17 wins for number 17 as he entered the comp. Um, just like last year, though, the second half was Lockie Schultz's territory in the forward 50. He had 0 touches in the first half, as did Michael Frederick. That shocked me. But they were able to get into the game in the second half, and a lot of Jackson's work out of the ruck was the reason for that. Is he a ruck? Is he a center half forward? Just play that Road to El Dorado soundbite. Both is good.
Mm-hmm. Very
And
much so.
then in terms of the D's, I think this exposes some of the problems that they've had the past few years. And also, you got to remember they're without Clayton Oliver for this stretch, and it's obviously difficult to make up for him. And him being out throws a lot of their game plan into flux. And that Jack Viney got a lot more attention, which has been warranted at the center bounce. You saw Willem Drew go to him last Friday when Namra at Yanapulte, and that helped change the game there. And so you have Viney getting more attention. I guess Brayshaw getting more attention as well. His brother Andrew reminding him to strap in at least once during the game. This was the game that I was focusing on in that window, so I saw a lot of these small things there. In terms of where the questions begin for the D's, they got to find a bit clearer of a midfield formation with Oliver out. They've got to find ways to free up some of those more well-known players. And I think Lockie Hunter coming back next week from suspension will help as well. Brayshaw did good defensive work on the wing, but he wasn't able to move as well offensively opposite with Ed Langdon on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
So they're without a couple key pieces still. Their forwards are healthy, which is good. Max Gawn and Brody Grundy are looking like a sharp pair, but they were outdone by Luke Jackson, who just seems to be so easygoing that he treated like any other game, which I find so impressive that he just took everything in stride. He made this his game. So I was so taken aback by how easy at times he made it look, and I would have a reason to be irritated by it. Hello, but I'm not. This is the Dockers side that I've been expecting to see. They got on Jackson so much out in the West when he'd still been working his way into what his role exactly was. While we're playing slower as a whole, they're getting back to what worked last year, and they figured out where Jackson's role fits in that. Plus, you've got greater depth of the forward line with Jai Amos and Josh Tracy. You're forgetting that Matt Tabater even exists. So they've really got things figured out. They've now gotten above 500. They're 6-5, and yeah, they're dangerous. I love
Mm-hmm.
watching them.
Fremantle's one of those teams that I think the issue that I had with them is that I wasn't, and I actually had this nice conversation in our fantasy thing back and forth with Lee, who's a huge Fremantle Dockers fan, and he's like, well, everybody judge Jackson quickly. I understand it, and it is one of those that sometimes the money can make something seem much more important than what it really is. Was Jackson stepping into a completely different system than he was at Melbourne or Nam? He was stepping into something completely different. And the other issue that he was running into a team that had lost a few more pieces that I think many people weren't talking about. Griffin Logan, Blake Acres, I think at the start of the year were big holes that they
I was
just
shocked at
couldn't.
how little they got for Akers. It was just a third rounder, and he had
Mhm,
solved so much of the Blues' problems that I'm surprised they weren't able to negotiate higher. But Ethan Hughes has been able to get more on the wing there. He is on the
mhm.
older side, but he's someone that I've been watching for the year. Nathan O'Driscoll's healthier. Ethan is
That
probably
helps
the
too.
biggest Nathan O'Driscoll fan in America, even
Mhm.
more so than Lee.
Which is pretty impressive. But that's the other thing though, is that and Melbourne is kind of that perfect thing because you have Ed Langdon and you have Hunter. Now, Hunter was suspended in this game, which I think was a bigger miss. I don't think Oliver is as big a hit to Melbourne's midfield as some people make it off, because in many ways he makes impacts, but he doesn't hit the scoreboard as much. Like, I think there are times that Clayton Oliver is a defensive liability because he ball hunts, as we kind of saw in, like, I know David King went through this really long, lengthy, just, and he showed sometimes Clayton Oliver can be a defensive liability. But I honestly think Lockie Hunter's missing was probably more the reason why it kind of threw them off, because normally Hunter and Langdon control the wings. They don't have to worry about them. They just say, hey, run the wings. That's all you have to do. They don't have to worry about it. They don't take many breaks because Langdon runs that far side wing, and I swear he never comes off the ground because he just runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. He really kind of takes away a difficulty when it comes to rotation, because he takes that wing and there we go. Lockie Hunter kind of takes the near side wing. He'll come off occasionally, which then you'll see maybe a Viney move out there, or maybe a Spargo or a Sparrow, one of their quicker small forwards, maybe move to the wing just a little bit just to give Hunter a spell. But when Hunter's back on, the wings are covered. And I think that threw them off a little bit because they really didn't have a full time guy to kind of take that spot. And it threw off their rotations a little bit. Oliver missing, those two missing in one game probably were a double factor. Jackson having a great game. The defensive core is not quick for Melbourne. They're very footy smart, but they're not fast. They're not fast at all. And when you've got a Schultz, a Frederick, and some of those really quick small forwards, they are a matchup nightmare, because if they can get loose, they're gonna do all day. And then you've got Jaya Miss, great hands. You've got Jackson when he goes forward, great hands. So this was just, could Fremantle be Melbourne's bogey team now? Because the way they're structured, it is not conducive to Melbourne's defense. So we'll have to see. Impressive win. Fremantle puts themselves in squarely back into finals discussion right now. They're right there, only out by a percentage, and a nice little run coming on for furthermore. So impressive
Yeah,
win. Hat
I'm
tip to the
impressed by
Fremantle Dockers.
I'm impressed by them. And looking at time on ground, Ed Langdon 89%, Angus Brayshaw 88%. Brayshaw's a player that's kind of able to slide anywhere from
Yep.
full back to a half forward flank role, and I think
Mm-hmm.
him having to take that wing role full time definitely did mess up those rotations there. And then when you're talking about those small forwards, the one name that I was hoping you mentioned and you didn't was Bailey Banfield.
I knew there was
Was
one more, and I
he's
couldn't think of it.
someone
It was right on the top of my head, but I couldn't think of it. So thank you for
yeah,
bringing.
Banfield and
He
I
was
have
the other
been
one. Yep.
yeah, Ethan and I have been championing Banfield for so long. We were wondering why was he the sub so often last year. He clearly got backed in with a bit of a contract extension, and he's shown why he belongs in the 22, if not the 18. Sure hands, smart when it comes to kind of the angles to take on his shots, and they've got the Dockers have that very strong mix of smalls and talls now, and they're mostly young, which has me even more excited for the future out there for Wayala.
Yeah, it'll be definitely fun. And again, I'm fascinated to watch this team grow, especially if Jackson can continue to play footy like that the rest of the year. He's going to be so much fun to watch. And huge shout out to Lee from our fantasy group. Huge Dockers fan. Always love chatting back and forth with him. I swear he is the fantasy guru. He's the guy I chat with all the time because
He
him and
beat
I
you
have
this week.
he's him and I have a fun little history because of the two previous seasons in the fantasy league, is where we both have been 1-2 each year, and both met in the grand final. And he gets mad at me because I've Steven Bradbury'd him twice. I've gone to the grand final and beat him both years. He is still not happy with me on both of them, because both of them I came out of nowhere. I came out of nowhere in the grand final and somehow found a way to win. Like, they were in both years. Some of his worst games have been that grand final both times. So it's been a fun thing. I jest with him all the time. I respect the heck out of him. He's an incredible guy. He's one of those, I know he put it in our fantasy thing. He's the only one that isn't a podcaster or a footy, or been on the podcast, or a footy journalist. So he's hilarious to me. Love the guy to death. Lee, you were fantastic, buddy. Have to give you a shout out. So we'll jump
I hope
to
he can. I hope he can get on the show at some point. Got some great insights out there.
Well,
Also, shout out to his ECU Pirates. Their baseball team should be fun this year. He's right there in Greenville.
yeah, he absolutely loves East Carolina just as much as he loves Fremantle for sure. So huge shout out to you, Lee. So we jump to it. GMHBA. This for me, sir, was the upset of the round. As much as many people said Carleton should have won that game, as much as many people said St. Kilda should have been Hawthorne. This I did not see coming. I know GWS has played pretty well down at GMHBA the last couple of times, getting wins. But when you've got Jeremy Cameron and you've got Tommy Hawkins, it's hard for me to tip against you. So tipping this one, I thought was almost a lock. I thought GWS on the road, GMHBA, it's probably a Cats win. And the Giants, their pesky little rear ends just kept coming and just kept pushing this Cats team. And Toby Green, with his incredible abilities, found a way on his 200th game to have an absolute cracker. Giants win by 7, 81-74. Am I off on this? For me, this is upset of the round.
For me, honestly, I would have said, I mean, I will say Hawks over Saints is still the upset of the round. For
Mm-hmm.
me, because Hawthorne had not found a way to win those close games, thinking back to the gather round game against the Giants at Norwood and the Anzac round game, the Anzac Sunday against the Crows. I think probably just talking so much with a Cats member who's very in the know, like Ethan is, maybe
Mm-hmm.
alert to what Geelong were lacking in this game. And in general, they lacked a damn midfield.
Mm-hmm.
Dangerfield being out is probably the most important out of the round. Mitch Duncan's still out. Jack Bowes remains out, and he's helped. They're both especially helpful on the defensive end.
Cam
Duncan is
Guthrie's still out.
Cam Guthrie out as well. Um, and then some questions about where some players were used as well. Sam DeConing being so forward. I mean, I'm glad that Jack Henry played further back, but DeConing forward was a question. Ethan will rant all night about the ineptitude of John Segler, and he's probably going to love Sam Naismith if they get him in the
Uh,
midseason draft, and you'll be able to give us some insight about Naismith if the Cats do get him.
Sam Naismith, heck of a player. My only worry with him is that his knees have let him down a little bit. I'm happy what he's doing at Williamstown. It's absolutely fantastic. But if it stays like this, I'm not even kidding with you. I wouldn't be surprised if the Swans give him another look. The
Yeah,
Swans have had,
he's at Port Melbourne.
yep. Oh yeah, Port Melbourne. I knew he was
Port
down in
Melbourne.
the VFL. Yep.
He's been averaging something like 40 hitouts.
Yeah,
And
he
well,
he was a great ruckman for us to issue. Like I said, he just couldn't stay healthy when he played. He was our elite number one ruckman, and I think his knee injuries was really the reason that pushed the Swans into getting Tom Hickey and Peter Laddams in two consecutive trade periods. So it's been fascinating to watch that. But I also want to look at it and go, when you say DeConning, it's like I want to go, no, we can't call him DeConning. We got to call him Batman because he wears that mask. And I know several
honestly,
people.
I just
Several
I
people have
thought
been
of him
bringing
as
that up.
I thought of him as Rip Hamilton.
That's a good one too, especially
Yeah,
an
or
American,
maybe should I say
American connection
like
there.
Cal's Jalen Brown at this point. But yeah,
uh,
I mean, I was glad that he got back in, but this game was won by the Giants consistently in the midfield and half forward. Toby Green, a big part about that. I was talking with you before the show. He's been taking more center bounce attendances
mhm,
this year. Tom Green is a bull when it comes to any of those stoppages, and he's an elite midfielder that I think is finally getting some of the praise that he's been deserved these past couple years from anyone outside of his Canberra fan club.
mhm,
And then Ethan was singing Brent Daniels' praises in particular from this game. There were some guys, where good things happen when they touch the ball. For the Swans, it's been Blakey when he's been on the run. For the Cats last year was Brad Close. Right now for the Giants, it looks like it's Binga.
mhm. Yeah, Brent Daniels is one of those guys. He's always around the footy. He's great at crumbs, and he's deadly. He kicks goals when he needs to. But I think with Tom Green, and I'll go off this, was Tom Green's biggest reason why he is exploding is because he doesn't have Hopper and Taranto taking up his time. Like they had Hopper, Taranto, Canelio. They had so many middies that were kind of in the way of Tom Green, and I heard about Tom Green and heard discussions out of New South Wales all the time. This Tom Green kid, when he gets on, he's going to be incredible. I'd heard it for 2 years, but the issue he ran into is when you have Callum Ward, you have Canelio, you have Hopper, you have Taranto. They had so many superstar midfielders since before Lockie Whitfield really got pushed back to the halfback line, where
which has helped him.
I think he's really excelled there because he's further out of the contest. He can use his space and speed a little bit. I think it's been an impeccable move by that. But I got to give the coaching because I think Kieran Briggs has been a revelation in the ruck, and he really did. He kind of exposed Segler a little bit in this game, being able to go forward. I believe Briggs even kicks a goal in this game as well. And when you can get impact from your ruck position, something that you never expect. You just hope that they win the headouts and you at least play good defensively and you at least even out the contest as much as possible. When you get impact from him, it sometimes can change a game, especially a close game like this. So again, the Giants, they did what they needed to do. Are the Cats in danger? I'd be interested to hear what Ethan says. I don't think they are because I think it's a little bit like last year. If they get healthy, the Cats have an absolutely fantastic lineup. The problem is are they a little bit more beat up than they were last year? That's the $1 million question. Dangerfield's a guy, if he gets in, he's a game changer when he wants to be. Sometimes not so much. It just kind of depends. But when he wants to be, he can be one of the biggest game changers. And when you've got Jeremy Cameron, who I think is still in ripping form and still has a shot to win the Brownlow if he can continue his great form, anything is possible with this Cats team because they just continue. And when Coach Scott is just an incredible coach, things are going to happen.
He did not plan well for this one. I think the adjustments that they made in the fourth quarter were better. They ended up drawing close to it was 4 goals each in the fourth quarter. It was 9 scoring shots to 4, but he didn't figure it out nearly soon enough. The problem with Dangerfield, by the way, is managing his time on ground at his
Mm-hmm.
age. You look at his dominant performance in the country game against Essendon, and they were able to manage that because he was only around 70% on ground for that game, and despite that, still nearly got the inside 50 record.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difficulty there, and when they aren't as deep, that's going to be even more difficult for them to manage his time in this uh, in this banged up lineup there. And yeah, Kieran Briggs, as you mentioned, I had been really impressed with him. The previous week, he did kick a goal from this one. He had a goal from 17 disposals, had 8 clearances, and 34 hitouts. He has taken that ruck 2 spot from Matt Flynn, and we'll see what Braden Pruse's health is like. He hasn't been ruled out for the season. They didn't label him as inactive, so clearly Adam Kingsley and company are backing him in to still get back. But Briggs deserves to stay. This past week, when I was on Craig Wessel's live show with for a Yank on the Footy, Rick and I were talking about how well they've developed Briggs and a few other of their players in recent years. So well done to the position coaches there. Well done to Shane Mumford, who I imagine you still have a lot of love for.
Oh, Shaney Mumford. Oh, he's both one of those that the Swans fans smile because he's a premiership player for the Swans, but also a bane of our existence with when his time with the Giants. So no, I'm happy for Shane that he's finding a way to help develop the GWS ruck, and they have had to kind of develop rucks more than that, more than the kind of the early years when they were drafting a lot of superstar players. They never really invested in the ruck position, so their development has been quite well. So I got to give them that. So as much as I would love to wax lyrical about this fun one, and I bet Ethan's sitting there going, get off this game. So we will jump to it. Let's jump up to Darwin in TO Stadium in a game that I labeled this in my tips. I said, I'm going to tip the doggies, but this is an upset I can see happening. I was half right because I tipped wrong, but I called that this was a potential upset. The Suns get a 7-point win over the doggies in Darwin, 84-77. And I have to say this, Jack Lukosius' second quarter, you are not going to get a better one with 4 goals, including an absolutely mental soccer style volley goal from the cross from the boundary. And all he did was stick his foot and guide it home with his foot. I have to admit, that was an incredible, incredible goal. seeing Nick Holman kick 2 goals in his, I think his 200th game
100th.
or 100th
He's
game.
really had to battle
Yep.
to get those 100 games. There was a great piece on him and what he's had to go through personally. I loved the game that Holman has. He's always one of those guys that is playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's willing to get into those scrums and really stick up for his team. And I've always really enjoyed his style. That was it
Mhm.
was a Ben Ainsworth cross, by the way,
Yep.
that led to that Lukosius goal. Ainsworth was on Lukosius. Um, I'm not sure if you heard what Ethan has nicknamed Jack Lukosius.
I
We've
have it right
started
on top of my head.
we started to call him Vinda Lukosius. It's like how Nick Larky's Sooth,
Hmm.
and also like Indian food, he's either really on or really terrible.
Pretty much, unfortunately.
We've seen how Jack Lukosic's ambition has hurt him this year,
Hmm.
and also how it's helped him in games like this, where that second quarter he had all four of the Suns' goals. As the Suns won that quarter 4 goals to 2 points off his efforts in front of goal alone, and it was a the Suns did have to back themselves in defensively near the end to fight off that late dog surge, but they had enough pieces there. I wasn't sure about Joel Jeffrey being trialed at halfback in the reserves when I liked him so much with his forward time last year. Last year against the Dogs out in Ballarat, he kicked
Hmm.
5, including one over his head.
Yep.
But he lifted when he needed to. I'm glad that the Suns got this in what has now become their second home. It was a great atmosphere for this game, and I'm now just even more excited for the Suns to host the Crows this coming round. And we'll obviously talk about the Crows at the end, with the Crows having played the Sunday night cap, but obviously Lukosius and Holman impressed. Matt Rowell in his 50th game, one of his
Mm.
most active yet. I believe it was 29 disposals, a goal, 23 contested possessions, 16 clearances, and 7 tackles. The Gold Coast Suns are far from just Tuke Miller. And Matt Rowell this year, he was so much of an off-ball tackler and wasn't getting as much of the ball control play himself. With Miller out, it necessitated Rowell to be more of that carrier along with Noah Anderson, Braden Fiorini, and it's worked for them tremendously.
Yeah, it's one of those. This is the Matt Rowell that we saw several years ago when he first came in. An absolute bull around it, is a contested beast. He gets the footy, he gets it out to his playmakers and Noah Anderson and some of his more speedy guys. He's not the flashy guy. He's not going to rip it. He's not going to rip it out, run through like a Bontempelli, and then hit somebody lace out from 45 meters. No, he's the bull. He's like Libba on the doggies. He gets down, he puts his head over the footy, he gets it, and then he gets it to his slick ball movers and Noah Anderson. I said it at the start of the year, and I still say it. I know it may seem kind of funky. Gold Coast is still a smoky to make finals if they can stay healthy and if they can continue this run of form. The issue that they run into is they're too Jekyll and Hyde for me. That's the frustrating part. Stewie Doo has got he's got to have bald spots underneath his hair. So many times he's had to rip his hair out because there are games they should have won. They had the talent, they had the ability, and it just didn't work. So seeing a game like this against a quality Bulldogs team that has found its form, is in the discussion to make finals, and for them to get a win in the heat of Darwin and to show their mettle to a lot of people. There's a few people switching to kind of like the Suns now, to the point where there's a few more admirers of this young Suns team. And what Stewie Doo is doing is amazing. I don't want him to leave. I think what he's doing, he's gotten some of these youngsters to stay and to sign, which never happened. A Lukosius, yes, they lost Rankin, but Lukosius, Anderson, Miller, Rao are re-signing. That shows what Stewie Doo can do.
That's really impressive on his part. And also, don't forget, yes, Rankin was traded home, but what did they get in return? They got pick six. And
Mm-hmm.
that pick six, Bailey Humphrey, has been phenomenal these past couple of weeks. He had
Mm-hmm.
the tough angle goal to ice it, but also these past 2 games, he's been playing much more through the middle of the ground. We've seen more complete footy from him. His first few games out, he was pretty much purely in the forward third. Was subbed out one time after getting, I think, just one kick for a game. He's been allowed to get more of a run at it. Maybe some of that again was from Miller being out, that they've tried some more pieces there going through the middle of the ground, but he's got a good pair of eyes on him, good pair of legs. He's got all things that are necessary, and he's got the vision that proves, they did some good work to know, we're getting something good in return for Rankin. And I mean, this could end up being a win-win trade for both of them. I forget who was saying that on Twitter when I was checking it this morning before I went into work. But yeah, Humphrey is the one that's impressed me the most. I knew what these other players could do. I wasn't sure about Humphrey on the full field.
Yeah.
And I also want to mention, the Suns beat the Dogs. They also beat the umpires. And as much as
I was
as
trying
much as
not to go there.
yes, however, you kind of have to in this one because of how horrendous it was. There were a few
Mm-hmm.
free kicks that I was spinning about. There was the super quick 50 that Ben
Mm-hmm.
Ainsworth got called for when he just stood there and they didn't give him a chance to move back 2 meters. There wasn't anything said.
I think
So
if
so the
if I
Suns were
remember, I'm not going to contradict you. If I remember correctly, the did catch on the umpire mic. They said he egregiously went over the mark at the time. Whether he did again, I'm let's. I've one of those. I said it on my podcast, and here's one of those. I try not to complain about the umpires because I really kind of feel like it's a cop out for many people. Do I saw the vitriol online. I saw it. I saw the Cody Waitman free, the behind the goals footage that showed that basically, I mean, Cody Waitman, I mean, where's the sniper? Because somebody shot him because there was no contact that should have brought him down the way he did, and a sniper got him. I don't know where, but a sniper got him for sure.
I don't like, railing on the umpires as well. This
And
was the
neither do
one time
neither
that
do I. Neither do I.
this was the one time this round that it
Yep.
really got to me, and
Yep.
I'm even more impressed with the Suns' win as a result of that they were able to keep their heads about them on the
Mhm.
field and in the coaching ranks, that they still got the pieces that they needed to do their job. For the Dogs, I do want to compliment a couple players of this one. Bailey Williams and Anthony Scott have gotten more and more into games this year. I think it's a 6-game goal kicking streak for Scott, a mature age guy who doesn't ever get huge possession numbers, struggles to get into the teens, but is very smart with the ball in hand. And Williams, I thought of him as a depth piece really for a while, but he's matured a lot this past year and a half. And obviously, you gotta love Jamari Ugle-Hagan kicking
Mhm.
goals in the Sir Doug Nichols round. I love the proud Depley sign that I saw
That
in the
was
stands
fantastic.
after his early one. Jamari Ugle-Hagan is just good for footy, and I'm so glad that he's kept his form after really finding something late last year. The Dogs
He
are still definitely top four contenders. It's a big pack behind Collingwood, and they've got the pieces. They've shown much more depth this year. They've stayed healthy as well, which is another thing
Mhm.
that's really helped them. And I think this is the first time that I'm actually noticing some good magnet moving and some in-game stuff too from Luke Beveridge, because we've been on him about that for a while.
Yeah, the signing of Liam Jones, I think, has helped him out a lot too, because he has that stable defender that can really do what he needs to do, whether it's one-on-one defending or being an intercept marker. So that's been a great signing for
Yeah.
me
Also,
personally.
Jones also being back there. I mean, obviously that's allowed Caleb Daniel to go to half forward, but also he's done a really nice job, I think, mentoring Ed Richards.
Hmm.
And Richards is one of their defenders, probably the defender back there of the future. And having Liam Jones back there has elevated his game as well.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And again, the doggies are there. I mean, the one thing that really helps the dogs out this round was the fact that everybody around them, it seemed like, lost when it comes to it. St. Kilda lost, Nam lost. So it's like they took a hit in a game. They probably, a lot of people kept telling them they were going to win. Thankfully, everybody around them, so they didn't lose a lot in the ladder, but it is a little frustrating to lose a game to a Suns team that, again, has been very, very inconsistent. So we'll jump out west. Last game of the early morning on Saturday for us, sir. And unfortunately, it is your beloved Eagles. But I'll let you take this. For me personally, I think this was a much better performance. I think Simpson is finally kindly figured out something that's going to work for these guys to where they're not going to get absolutely flogged. I'm interested. Do you think that West Coast improved, or did Essendon take them lightly?
I mean, there was nowhere to go but up
Mm-hmm.
for the Eagles from last week. They
Low bar.
scored all of 26 points. They scored 46 in this one, so that's something. Oscar Allen, I believe, had 4 of those, 6 goals. They're still frequently exposed, and obviously they lost some control late. They were able to keep it closer. I did think Essendon took them a little lightly. They backed off on a lot of their pressure after that 4-goal first quarter from them. The Eagles did get to them in clearances. They ended up going from -9 of the first quarter in clearances to +5 of the first. They were keeping lowering their heads around the ball. They were getting enough guys there at stoppages. Shanahan being back definitely stabilized their defense as well. He's still such a consistent good kick. Even at his age, you can see the damage it's done when Bung is out of the lineup, and I am going to miss him after this year. I'm assuming that this is his last campaign. I I wish I'd been able to see his whole career and appreciate him even more than I already do. The main thing about Adam Simpson in this game is he just didn't care about, what the preconceptions of this lineup were. He was willing to throw the pieces around. And I've been an advocate for that all year. I've been saying all along, get get looks from as many different guys at as many different spots as possible. Give them 2 or 3 games in a row to show their mettle in a few spots on the field. Maybe don't make changes every few minutes like I saw him doing in this one, but take stock of what you have, especially on the younger side. And we saw that in this game. That is the biggest thing that I liked in this one. I'm a huge Brady Hoff fan. He was injured to start the year. I'm glad he's getting the consistent time now. Had 21 disposals of this one. Looked much more sure of himself. So that's the biggest positive I'm taking away. They couldn't get much worse than last week. The scoreline, I mean, obviously the 6-10 is not great. The fact that there were only 3 goal kickers isn't great, but they were moving things around. They were making the job more difficult for Essendon as a whole. They nearly doubled him in hitouts, which was kind of shocking. Bailey J. Williams I was so critical of him the first part of the year, round 1. I was ready to throw chairs about his performance against North, and I'll just face it, I nearly did. But he's looking much more composed, and yes, there are positives to take from it. We'll see if they stick now, because you can. I don't want to just go off one game and say they're fixed. I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to say that. They're going to get exposed by Collingwood next week. They're going to get. I think Brody Mychek and Ash Johnson are going to run them over. Bobby Hill could kick a bag. They got a trip to the Crows after that. After the bye, they got the Swans. That is not going to be fun, because we know what that rivalry has become, and it's become everything but one lately. So,
Unfortunately.
fortunately for you,
Hey, I'm
but
one of those. I hate blowouts. I really love competitive footy. I agree. I've heard Craig Wessels say this so many times. He goes, I want to see my team win, and I want to see 8 other great games. I like seeing great footy. I hate blowouts. I think they damage the product more than they do it. I know fans like seeing, like, they like the percentage booster games, but I want a competitive situation. I want Simpson to figure out a way to get this West Coast team to be competitive. Even if they lose, as long as they're in the game. This isn't the rollover 50, 75, 100, 110 point losses. Those absolutely suck. But when you lose by 20, you're competitive, you're in the game, and you show some fight. There's at least something to get somewhat positive over. But you get beat over the head over and over and over again. It really is difficult sometimes to sit there and watch, because You just don't want to see your guys not playing well.
That's exactly it. I mean, looking at some of the totals here, it was the older guys that were still leading the way for the Eagles. Tim Kelly was probably the leader in a lot of aspects. Liam Duggan as well. Obviously, Oscar Allen with the 4 goals. It's going to be still a difficult few years for this new core, whatever it will be, to really emerge. And I hope they continue focusing on homegrown talent there. Target you know some depth pieces from other clubs with a bit of AFL experience in trades. Guys like I know I would love for them to take a flyer on Mitch Georgiadis, for example, from Port Adelaide. Yes, he did his ACL, so maybe that'll mean you could get him even more on the cheap from Port. And he plays. I noticed him playing his best when he was around a key guy like Charlie Dixon. So there's one. Devin Robertson had 21 tackles for the Brisbane Lions in the VFL this past week against Frankston, I believe. So it's those types of guys that I want them to target in terms of making trades. It's still going to take a few years, and I'm not sure if Simo's the guy that I want long term for it, but they're trying different things out. They stayed much more competitive in this one, and those are the positives that I have to take because there ain't much else.
At least you're trying to find something at least for sure. So we'll move on. We'll jump
Please.
to the Sunday games. Starting off, MCG, Port Adelaide, go over to the G, get a 10-point win over Richmond. And Richmond started off okay. I was interested to see, do they get the caretaker coach bounce? Sometimes caretaker coaches can give you a bounce, they can play really well.
Oh, you
Richmond
saw it
started
last
off
year.
exactly. They got a little bit of a bounce to start off the game, and unfortunately, Port Adelaide kind of went, "Yeah, I don't think so," and really kind of put it on him at the end of the first quarter, and then it just kind of got away from Richmond. Richmond was competitive. Tim Taranto had a day out, if I remember correctly. He had 4 goals in this game. Ever since the first quarter, pretty much Port Adelaide led this one, mostly wire to wire, except for that little bit that Richmond led. Richmond climbed within a few points there in the fourth quarter, probably put a little bit of a scare, but Port Adelaide rolls it back out to get the nice 10-point win. Port Adelaide again, Hinkley started off a little bit. The unattainable, it continues to make me chuckle a little bit because it just looks super, super jump to conclusion. Kenny Hinkley has to be sitting in his lounge room today, beer in hand, just smiling because his team is playing great footy and they look to be cherry ripe as the season goes on. And this is despite injuries to some key players on this lineup.
No Charlie Dixon, no Todd Marshall. Ollie Lord has shown that he belongs in the 22 even when those two are out. Zach Butters and Ollie Wine started this game on the bench, believe it or not. And, they still got into the game so well. Butters is a Brownlow Smoky as well at this point. I mean, I'm not even sure if he's a Smoky anymore because of just how strong he's been these past couple weeks. He had a game like Toronto had this past week, going back last Friday when Yard and Pudi were playing Nom in that awesome 4-point Friday night win out in Adelaide. The thing that I found really hard to think Richmond were going to win this, especially after that 1 goal 7-second quarter where they left so much on the board and they weren't able to. That was their best chance. They weren't able to get much closer after that. You saw guys like Willem Drew get into the game in the second half for the Power. He had only had 2 disposals in the first half, and then what does he do? He starts going toward Tim Taranto, and even though Taranto still got so much of the ball, Drew being in proximity allowed him to get more touches. He got the first goal of the second half, and they made the adjustments they needed to in that regard. They had 10 goals from 10 different players. This was a great stat from Swamp here. Um, Power, the first team to win without a multiple goal kicker since Carlton round 20 of 2012, round 12 of 2020 against the Dockers. That was the Jack Noons after the Siren game.
Mm-hmm.
Mick Gibbons should have had that shot. The AFL admitted that. And
Yep.
then it was the first time it's happened since in a game with 20-minute quarters since the Crows did it 2019 against the Dockers. So the versatility is there from Port's list. Some of the younger guys back there Miles Bergman, Dylan Williams getting into it have allowed some of their other maggots to be moved around. Heck, Bergman was moved around in this game even, but Darcy Burns-Jones is reborn he went from an All-Australian half back to this insane pressure half forward who's allowed some of the other players those opportunities toward goal and created a lot of great possessions. I'm really impressed with what Hinckley has done to really evaluate the talent that he has and get the best out of him. This is now 8 wins in a row for him since Showdown.
Yep. And again, Hinkley was just masterful. And again, I've said this numerous times. Port has a list that if you just look at it, everybody healthy, they're a flag contender. I've said this numerous times. That just the issue has been a combination of injury, a lack of form, and just last year they got in a hole. They had a bad start to the season, got 0-5, and just never could really dig themselves out of it. This year,
But for
started.
most of the rest of the year, sorry to cut you off there,
No,
they
no,
were
you're good.
playing, especially after the bye, they were playing like a finals team. You look at the
Hmm.
kinds of opponents they beat. And so, no, I really wasn't sure about them coming into the year. I wasn't sure of what Hinkley's merit as a coach was, but we've seen it now. And I know that they lost a couple of assistants going back to last year, so I think the coaching ranks had to figure some things out as well. They look very cohesive now. The question obviously will be, what will September hold?
Yep, and that's the biggest question. I know people in SA. It's unfortunately Hinkley's chain is very very short now, and it's how far they go and what will they tolerate and what will they not in SA, and that is a very tough market when it comes to it. So, jump over as Collingwood defeat the North Melbourne Roos by 35. And I have to say this, when I first stepped into this round, I thought this was going to be one of those where Collingwood was going to have a percentage booster. They were just going to have a field day. And North hung in there. North stuck around. Yes, it blew out to 30, but this is a North team that I have several North mates who I've said the building blocks are there. Whether Clarko returns or not is the least of my worries at this point. Just the list, looking at it there is some success coming if they can keep it together and keep it healthy. The issue will be is can they bring in some veteran talent to kind of continue to nurture it? Whether Goldie has many more years left, will Cunnington continue to stay? I don't mind guys like Hall. I don't mind guys like Mackay, but they still need some experience around these guys. So how does next year go? Can they bring in an experienced head just to continue to nurture these guys because the talent is there? Wardlaw, Sheasel, and Davies Uniacke, Coleman Jones. The young talent is there. The core is there. The question is, can they keep it developed? Collingwood, I mean, it's easy to say with them. Dacos, DeGoey, Pendlebury. I'm gutted for Steele Sidebottom 200, and he goes out with a knee injury.
300.
Absolutely, or 300. Absolutely gutted for him because incredible player for Collingwood. I hope he's not out very long because he's just such the great footy player. I love watching him play. So Collingwood, they did what they needed to do.
Yeah, well, this was the game that I was focusing on in this window. When Ethan and I, we go through the round, we divide up the schedule to figure out, who takes the certain overlap games. This was the game that I was paying more attention to in this period. Admittedly, North did their best work once Collingwood had let off their pressure in the fourth quarter. You look at 3-quarter time. Collingwood were leading 13-8-86 to 4-9-33, and then North won that last quarter 6-3. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, grains of salt there if you want. It was Eddie Ford actually that impressed me the most for North this game, number 40. Only his second game this year, but very sure with the ball in hand. Really pinpoint kick at times. Was impressed with his field kicking, and he's the biggest individual positive I got out of this game. Was also happy that Jaden Stevenson did manage a couple goals in his 100th game, milestone for him as well. And he's found a much more consistent role in this system that Clarko and Ratton have had. I mean, compared to whatever the hell David Noble threw out there. So that's something that I've really enjoyed seeing. Obviously, love seeing Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw get more into things. Nick Larkey kicking 5-2. It's the game that we expect from him, aside from one shocking goal side miss that clanged into the post. I do need, when I go back and look at this game again, I'll need to be a bit more meticulous in how I viewed the Roos through those first three quarters to see what I liked out of them in those stretches when they weren't converting on the scoreboard. They did kick 2-5 in the second quarter, and if they had an opportunity to really keep this one within arm's reach, it was there, and they weren't able to take it. In terms of Collingwood, yes, they did what they needed to do. I was so pumped for Mason Cox's 2 goals in his 100th game. Of course, they had the camera trained on his whole family there. Phil might know more about the footy than Mason. Mason's even said that himself, and I would love to get Phil on our show at some point. A great guy. I mean, I hope that it's, obviously Mason did help us get into the game a bit, knowing about him, and I hope that his presence will allow more Americans to learn about how amazing the game of footy is. I hope that, whenever his playing career is done, he helps grow the cause in the United States as well.
Well, and I completely agree with it. And again, a huge shout out to Mason Cox. Like I said, I had the pleasure of meeting him this year. Shook his hand, and again, my hand disappeared because his hand is massive. Holy crap! I didn't get a chance to like sit there and chat with him a little bit. I would have loved to have been able to talk to him about the podcast and maybe see if there's a way to get him on there because I love what he's doing. His initiative to try to help spread the sport is fantastic. I wish him all the best. And I'm glad to see that he found a way to make it work. And that's fantastic. Getting 100 games, like I said, it was a little sad that it was overshadowed by Steele. And then Steele goes out and it kind of became about Mason, which was absolutely fantastic. But again, the Pies, this is a team that it's hard not to argue. They're absolutely lovable. Fly McRae he's found a way to make the team that everybody used to hate likable, which is very, very hard to do for many people. But again, Pies, congratulations, another big win. And then what I would consider another upset to end the round as the Adelaide Crows at home take down the mighty Lions by 17, 95-78. And I called this one and I said this, and I don't know what it is, but Brisbane, when they leave the confines of the GABA, their team changes. I don't know what it is. They're not nearly as effective. They're not nearly as on. And I hate saying it that way because I mean they're a footy team. They know how to play the game, but there's just something off. Like they leave the confines of the GABA and something changes. They're just not the same team. They'll win occasionally if they have more talent. But this was a Crows team that I think they had their mulligan against the Dogs down in Ballarat. They had their mulligan. They had their, oh yeah, just not their day. They showed why they're still legitimately a solid finals team and a team that can do some damage on their day.
You can also remember the Crows were without a number of important pieces for that game out in the Central Highlands. Riley Philthorpe and Tex Walker came back into the forward line. Defensively, Tom Duday and Josh Worrell returned. Really love Worrell's game in this one defensively. I'll tell you one thing that tripped up the lines of this one were the conditions. They
Mhm.
they don't get rain like they saw in Adelaide a whole lot. In Queensland, they're very fortunate with the weather they have at the Gabba, and I think that stuffed them up a bit. Obviously, when they had the chances in front of goal, that 1 goal 9 third quarter did so much damage to them. On the defensive end, I think people are starting to realize the importance of Jack Payne because he was not in this game.
Mhm.
And the downgrade from Jack Payne to Ryan Lester, who I was high on Froggy getting opportunities this year. He'd always been that next man up, but it's Payne who has taken the biggest leap in defense this year for the Lions, being able to both play 1v1. A few weeks back, he limited Charlie Curnow to just 1 goal. He's
Mhm.
been that loose guy on occasion. I took note of that performance of his at the Anzac round in Canberra. Jack Payne's out, I think, was the most damaging thing in terms of the list for this game, even more than the Crows' ins. So
Mhm.
you can't shy away from that when you're talking about why this game had the flow that it did. It was also a really great game in so many ways from Josh Rochelle. You can talk about that soccer background all you want, but maybe that did contribute to how efficient he was kicking the ball. By three-quarter time, I believe he had 10 kicks, all of which were efficient. And for him to be able to do that in the slick conditions like that, still have the nose for goal that he did is really impressive. The depth in this Adelaide side in the forward two-thirds of the ground is so impressive, but they've been very fortunate with their health as well, which is
Hmm.
something you can't avoid, which you shouldn't avoid talking about in this one. That's a big part of why they're up there in seventh right now. Seventh, ahead of Essendon and Wallella by percentage.
Yep. And that's the biggest thing is one of the things that's really going to tell you how good a season you are is how healthy you can be. The healthier you are, the better you're going to be because when you can put your best 18 out there every round or for more rounds than your opponents, usually is going to be a good thing. Again, this
That's one thing that helped the Lions so much as well
yep, yep,
this whole year, and it's amazing how much one important piece being out can do. You
yep.
saw that from a few teams this round, and I think none more so. Even with what non were missing in terms of Clayton Oliver, as we were talking about earlier, Lockie Hunter as well.
Yep.
The one most damaging out this round, I will say this. I will say this. As long as we talk about this round, it was Jack Parker Payne being out for Brisbane.
Mhm. I completely agree. And to go off that, look if you get a chance, go back to Richmond's list from 2017 through their dynasty, 3 of their 4 years. If you look at it, most of their years that they won, their their injury lists were some of the smallest all season. 2017, I swear, Richmond could not get an injury. They did not get an injury. They were constantly with one of their best teams. 2018, I swear they didn't have an injury the entire year. It just seemed like everything worked the way they needed it to. So that really kind of shows you when you get your best team and a good team at the same time can stay healthy, very, very dangerous. So that is going to do it for the 9 games from this round. As we said, upsets were the talk of the town. So we jump to what I call burning questions, questions that have been running into my head. We're only mere hours from the end of the game, but I still have some quandaries that I think I really, really would like to discuss. We kind of talked about a few of them in here, but I still just like to go over them just real quickly. To start off, as we said, this is the round of big upsets with so many ones. So I ask you this, Ben, in your opinion, biggest and best upset of this round?
I had mentioned earlier, as much as the odds makers love Geelong against the Giants, I've been able to see where their flaws were going to be and why they lost the way they did, despite O'Shea Mullen having a really nice debut. Didn't mention Mullen yet, but love the early signs from him. Just his fifth game of footy coming over from County Mayo and looking very much in tune with the play style that the Cats have. Also, the first time ever that three Irishmen suited up for the same club, with Tui joining Portlaoish's Zach Tui and Dingle County Kerry's Mark O'Connor, which was an amazing thing for the growth of the game. Seeing the Irishman in focus this round, seeing the American as well in Mason Cox. But I still contend that the big shock for me, at least, was Hawthorn beating St Kilda. The Hawks hadn't found the way to win those close games yet. Their younger pieces were able to get the job done. Jacob Kaczynski had been so maligned this season, had not been accurate, had been dropped a couple times, was in for this one, was on point when he needed to be late, and there's so much to be proud of for how Hawthorn have silenced some of their critics as of late, and I'm so impressed with what they've done. Also, I must say, their jumpers for the Sir Doug Nichols round are impeccable, both
Mm-hmm.
for the men and for the women. I saw the VFLW jumper as well, but holy cow, those things were stunning and probably elevated my opinion of the Hawks even further this round.
Yeah, hard to disagree with you there. And like I said, it's GWS for me just because that one came out of nowhere. I thought Cats at home, they're always so good. I know that GWS had went down there, but I think they had went down there with a few better teams altogether. So to go down there with a team that had been struggling a little bit, that was impressive. And Toby Green to do what he did in a milestone game, always fantastic.
And also, don't forget, the Giants were without Nick Haynes and Harry Himmelberg.
Hmm.
Both of them had gotten concussed in the first half the previous week, so the defense stood up when they needed to. Obviously, Hawkins and Jez's inaccuracy didn't help there. Jez kicking 2-3. So I can completely understand why you were so surprised by the Giants. I just wasn't as much. I had almost tipped this game for the Giants. I just thought the Cats would have squeaked by in the end on the talent that they had on paper. So was I a little surprised? Yes. Not as much as by the Hawks, though.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We'll definitely have to see how that goes. We'll jump to the next one. I was able to get a hold of Ross. I know he's done with his wedding. He's back from his honeymoon. So he decided to be nice and send in his question of the week. And surprise, surprise, he decides to go for GWS. So, Ross, I will let you take it away with your question of the week.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Gentlemen, it's a great day to be a fan of a underdog team. The Sydney Swans for you. Donnie pulled it off well. So did my GWS Giants, and so did most. This round was crazy. This was a lot of fun. But I gotta you know where my mind's at this point. GWS pulled off a big upset. They've won the last 3 games when they've gone to GMHBA, and they're just better than the Cats apparently. What can I say? And especially, it was a big round because our boy, the U.S. man, Mason Cox, game 100. So happy to see that. And then on the other side, we had Toby Green, game 200. And in game 200, he was a huge player, kicked the first goal of the game. He ended up kicking 4, and he's a stud. We all know this. He's a total stud, one of the best in the comp. So I have to ask you, when it's all said and done, Donnie and Ethan, where will Toby Green rank in terms of the best players of his generation? I'll say he's the best player of his draft class, but I think he's going to go down as one of the best players of his generation. So there's a question for you. Feel free to define for yourselves what his generation is and whether or not he's going to go down as one of the best to ever do it. Maybe top 5, top 3. I really want to see what you guys think about this one. Have a great rest of your show. I miss you guys, and I mean, for those on the video, you could see that little piece of hardware. I'm back. It's been a good honeymoon. Love you guys. Have a great show.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Thanks, Ross. And then really quickly, I will take a little bit of a issue here. This is my fault on this. He says, Ethan, it was Ben. That's on me. My text message. So Ben, I do apologize for him calling you your brother. I don't know if that's an insult or not. It depends on who you talk to. So I will take a little bit of, so we'll jump into his question again. I don't know if let's stay with generational because I think it's a very, very broad. So I know you pulled it up since we were talking about this a little bit before this goes. Pull up his draft class a little bit. We'll say, is he one of the better ones of the draft class? Because I know the Giants got a lot of concessions in this draft because it was early when it comes to setting up their club.
I mean, this was the last draft before they took the field in the AFL for the first time. Yeah, it's just still hard to define generation. And as a newer viewer of the footy, again, this just being my 4th year watching, as invested as I am, it's hard for me to go back and really see kind of the impact of, where you draw those boundaries. But I mean, this was a really impressive draft class in a lot of ways. Obviously, the Giants managed to get so many pieces from it, and some of them are actually even still with the club, believe it or not. Nick Haynes was picked 7th overall. Toby Green was picked 12. Are any of their other picks actually still with the club? Actually, maybe not. That's kind of sad. Yeah, wow. Yeah, they're the only ones that are still there. But you look at, let's look at the other players that have gone through there. Stephen Cornelio at pick 2. You stack up Toby's play against Cornelio. You could definitely, you'll argue, even with what he's done to damage his own reputation with the disciplinary issues, I could say Toby Green's been the best player in Greater Western Sydney Giants history to this point. Maybe Tom Green will change my opinion on that eventually. Tom Green and his fan club, of course. And then this was a pretty impressive draft, even despite the concessions that the Giants ended up getting. You look at the other All-Australians, Chad Wingard picked 6, Sam Darkney picked 12, former Giant Taylor Adams at 13, Tom Mitchell was picked 21 as a father-son initially to Sydney. You had Elliot Yeo at pick 30, Joe Hamling 32, Brad Hill 33. Brad Hill still putting up good numbers there. Glad he's reemerged on the wing for the Saints. Torrey Dixon, 57. I'd say still Lockie Neal is the strongest of this class at 58. And one last Premiership player way down there, pick 86, it was Jed Buse.
Mm-hmm.
So a pretty deep draft, even despite all the concessions that the Giants got. And this is also just the second draft for the Gold Coast Suns as well, since they took the first one since they had started in the AFL. If you're looking at where he stacks in terms of his draft class, I would compare his output with that of the two Brownlow medalists, Tom Mitchell and Lockie Neal. Mitchell's opinion on Mitchell took a bit of a dive these past couple years. He didn't have as good pieces around him. This year, he's got a much more complete midfield around him. He's able to free up Jordan DeGoey to do his best work, whereas DeGoey had to be a bit more bullish at the immediate stoppage, getting some more of the clearances himself. It's actually, DeGoey in another part of this draft class, Taylor Adams, that had benefited so much from Mitchell's emergence there. So Mitchell and Neal, I'd still put a little above Toby Green at this point. I think just the career accolades and what Mitchell was able to do with that Hawthorn team probably are swaying my opinion in their favor. But from an individual standpoint of what Toby has done to elevate the Giants himself, I can understand if you put him at the top of the draft class. I wouldn't make a huge debate over it. I mean, you look at the players that I'd really object. I mean, I draw much more of an objection for pretty much anybody else outside of those three. You can put those three anywhere you want.
It's a very interesting draft, and it's funny to kind of look at it and see some of the hidden gems that you see that you're like, whoa, okay, he was drafted a little bit later than I would expected. Like seeing Jared Witt's at 67 has been
Luke Bruce 77, a rookie promotion for Hawthorn.
Yep. So seeing those ones those are absolutely fantastic. When it comes to it, it's hard to argue that you look at it again. Sam Mitchell had an incredible career. Again, he's kind of moved clubs. He's moved clubs a little bit. He's up there.
Tom Mitchell, that is Titch.
Yep. And then Toby Green. You got a lot of arguments that Toby Green could be one of the best players out of this particular draft. I mean, it's just fascinating to see Patton at the top of that draft board and how his career kind of tanked after a while. So it's very interesting just to look and see some of like Elliot Yeo there a little bit later, Brandon Ellis going.
As an Eagles fan, I love Elliot Yeo for what he's been able to provide. When he's healthy, he could still be a solid halfback. It's just he happens to have been born with glass bones and paper skin.
Unfortunately, so yeah, I mean Will Hoskin, Elliott going there. So there's some great names again. I would say you have some arguments that Toby Green is, for where he was drafted, could be the best person out of this draft. So an interesting question there, Ross, for sure. So we'll go back to the present day a little bit, and I'm always
Thank
interested.
you, Ross, and congrats also on the wedding. I mean, it seems like you and your new wife have really been enjoying things. So thrilled for you and everyone around you to be celebrating that.
Yeah, absolutely awesome for him and Phoebe. Absolutely fantastic. So we'll jump to it. I'm always interested in this, and maybe this is always the sports talk type of topic here, is that should teams like Melbourne and Geelong be worried about their shaky form over these last few rounds, or is it kind of more of looking at their injury lists and still knowing that we are only 11 rounds through a 23 game season?
It depends on how healthy they're both able to get. We saw what the D's lost, with Oliver and Hunter being out. Those two combined to really mess up their structure. If you're wanting to go back to last year, the D's started 10-0. They finished out 6-8, with 500 through the rest of the home and away, and then out in straight sets in the finals. And then now through this season, if you add that up, so since the bye last year, I guess they've been 13-12. And they've obviously had a tough run. They've had a tough schedule the whole way. Their losses have been understandable ones, but at times I think they reverted a little too much to what some of their woes were last year, with too many long kicks into the 50 when you've got so much capability through the middle of the ground. You got the depth there. I love what Kate Chandler has done this year. I tipped him to be a big riser when Kazi Pickett was out suspended at the start of the year, and he's largely kept that up. I would love to see him doing some more running into the forward 50. The pieces are there. This is an extremely deep list for the D's, and I think I need to see them be a bit more handball based. Look at those shorter options more. They can get there. I still tip them to be one of the final four teams standing at the end of the year. As for
Yeah.
actually, I'll let you chime in here because it seems like you were pretty eager.
No, I'm completely with you on this one. I hate making these calls halfway through the season because I think there have been so many times where you've put a team down. I mean, we've even done it this year with Port Adelaide. It's 3 or 4
King's done
games
it with
into the
Geelong.
season. Hinkley is gone. Hinkley, there's no way he's gonna die. And then look at the run they've went on. And I don't think anybody expected Melbourne to tank the second half of the year to kind of fall apart after the bye. So it's very fascinating to see. I'm with you. I think Melbourne almost a little bit like Geelong too. It's like I don't want to look at their form now. I want to look at their form 15, 16, and 17 because if they're starting to fall back, if they're starting to get closer and closer to getting out of the finals, then you should be worried. Right now, still a little early.
Yeah, looking at the upcoming fixtures for the D's as we're talking about this, my birthday begins with the D's playing Carlton. That's the Friday nighter. I'm going to be 23 on Friday. Then they got Collingwood for the King's birthday. They go to Geelong for a Thursday game where I think will tip the D's for this one. As weird as it might sound, going to Geelong, we saw what happened there last year with how they got run over. But I'm less sure of the Cats at the moment. Their outs are more damaging. We'll have to take stock of their health once they have the bye in a couple rounds' time. Down the stretch for the D's, they also got a 3-week run where even you can look at how tough the Giants have been at times. And they've got, after that Thursday night with Geelong down at the Cattery, Giants, St Kilda, Brisbane, and Adelaide. And that's going to be a make or break stretch for them when it comes to the top 4 hopes for them. If you're looking toward the Cats fixture as well, you have to contextualize everything that we see about the injury list and kind of what their prospects are in terms of where their fixture lies. I'm more concerned about the Cats fixtures. Right now, I'm tipping them to be 5-9 because you saw what their lack of midfield depth did this week, and they got the Dogs this coming week. And I think Marcus Bontempelli, Tom Liberatore, Baslenka, I think they're all licking their chops, seeing the run that they could have through the Cats. They're really tough. They've had this really bad track record out of the bye. They got to go to Port for that. Then they got the D's, the rematch against a hopefully healthier Swans by that point. They've got Geelong and Sydney have the 2 toughest schedules this year, and the hole that the Cats have found themselves in, some of which is admittedly by their own doing again. Ethan and I have both been really critical of the magnet moving that Chris Scott did this past week. It's gonna be kind of a combination of the health in all their fixtures and whether or not Chris Scott will make the right moves given what he's seen these past few rounds.
Yeah, it'll definitely. I don't want to make any huge jumps on that, but again, I agree with you. And the funny thing is I heard it on the podcast for the Saturday rub for Triple M Melbourne, is that this is actually kind of going to plan that usually grand final even winners have struggled a little bit the next year, and some have even missed the finals. So as much as talk as they had about the Swans and the teams that were beaten badly, even some grand finalists have struggled too. So it's interesting to see that particular form ladder kind of stay with it a little bit too. So we'll go to the last question, and we kind of already answered this, but I'm going to throw a little caveat on the end of it. Is Carlton's season over after this loss to the Swans? Should they shut it? Should they shut it down? Stop, play some kids, move some things around? And then is this on Michael Voss or is this on the players?
I love that Sam Walsh has been very upfront these past couple weeks saying we need to be better. We need to make the fans' attendance worthwhile. We need to back ourselves in. You can put the blame on all parties at this one. You put the blame at the selection table. I'm still not sure what Jordan Boyd exactly provides ahead of Alex Chincata and a couple others. We're still waiting on Jackson Binns' debut. Play the younger guys that are showing the promise. Yes, Chincata is not young by any means. I believe he's 26-year-old mature age VFLer. But, they should be testing their depth at this point. I do see their season as being cooked at this point at 4-6-1 with a gaggle of really competitive teams ahead of them, and their schedule not being conducive to a whole lot of improvement. Looking at the matchups they got coming up, the D's this Friday, Essendon round 12. They got then hosting the Suns round 13. If they drop that one, you can really write them off. Maybe I'm a little premature on this. Of course, I'm going to be most critical of Harry Mackay when it comes to the forwards. He's still a strong mark, got good hands. I've seen him go up to some kind of forward wing spots and accelerate play from there with his marking ability. But you've got Matthew Lloyd's brother in there on the board. Bring in Matty as a left footer too. Get him in there to see what he could fix. And maybe, just maybe, they could reel themselves in. I don't want them to make radical changes yet in terms of coaching and upper structure. I want this season to play out. I want next to play out as well. They've been so quick to react. It's like they got a hair trigger on like the terminate button.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm saying they're not going to make the 8 this year, but I don't want to think that this whole Michael Voss project was a failure just yet. It's 2 years is so premature to be able to write something off. I mean, I was so critical of how Essendon handled Ben Rutten after just 2 years, and we've seen the merit of Brad Scott obviously thus far. We didn't get too in depth talking about Essendon this round because they were playing the Eagles, but I just don't want to write this whole Michael Voss era off too quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a little bit of expectations from the fans, and you understand it after last year falling just this tiny. I mean, it was a goal late in the game that literally cost them. That was it. So you understand the expectations, but the part that I don't think this is coaching. I think the players have lost confidence, especially Harry Mackay. For some weird reason, he's broken. He cannot kick on either foot correctly. He can't make up his mind whether he wants to snap or go or kick a drop punt. When he does kick a drop punt, it doesn't go straight.
His angles do not make sense to me. I don't think you'd see him in a Picasso Cubist painting or something like that. But I will say, it's the other player that I do want to put a bit of a spotlight on and, hope for better for out of this is Corey Durden.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's kind of flown under the radar because he hasn't been, obviously with the 2 Coleman medalists there, he's not, a top target for them. But I thought he'd be that third guy. He got a decent amount of opportunities last year. Jesse Motlop's been able to get the pill and have his good flashy moments. But between Corey Durden and Jack Silvani, one of them really needs to live to provide that depth and kind of that medium-sized forward spot. And neither of them have. And that's also why it's hurt so much that Mackay's had the form that he has, is that the other guys behind him haven't been able to lift either. And the Blues haven't been targeting him nearly enough either. It's a similar situation to with the D's, honestly, where I want to look for those shorter options more, and they seem so averse to doing it for some reason.
Mm-hmm. You know, and you can't tell me that's coaching. You can't tell me that's coaching. Yeah, absolutely not. I think that is a lack of confidence in some of their teammates. So they go to what they know best. They know best is we've got two monster beast Coleman medalists up front. They'll do it. So then they just launch it up, and unfortunately, it's just not working. So like I said, I hope Carlton figures it out. I never like seeing a fantastic club that is Carlton down where they are, but unfortunately, sometimes it happens. So that will do it for our burning questions. We jump to the little section of the podcast where I kind of it's a little bit about me. I don't try to make it that way, but everybody, this is always one of my more fun things, is that I sit down on Sunday mornings, I go through the statistics, I watch the games, I double check, and I make my team of the round. I focus a little bit more on in scoring a little bit. So sometimes you're going to get some guys that are going to come out a little bit out of nowhere. So I'm interested to hear what you think on this, Ben. On this, Ben, as I put this team together, I'm trying to keep positionally sound. So I try to keep guys in the positions that they normally play. So starting with the defense, we'll start with the fullback line. Sydney's Nick Blakey go out of the pocket. Callum Wilkie and James Sicily from the Hawthorn Hawks on the back line for the fullbacks. At the halfback line, Fremantle's James Aish, Essendon's Mason Redmond, and Collingwood's Nick Dacos. On the wings, since I got to give some wings love, since I don't always get it, would be Sydney's Justin McInerney and Collingwood's Josh Dacos. In the center square, Ruckman Luke Jackson, center square midfielders Chad Warner from the Sydney Swans, Richmond's Tim Taranto, and Collingwood's Jordan DeGoey. On the forwards, it's pretty simple. The guys that kick the most goals make the team of the round. Half forward line will be GWS's Toby Green, St. Kilda's Max King, and Gold Coast Jack Lukosius. The full forward line sees Charlie Cameron of the Brisbane Lions, West Coast's Oscar Allen, and North
Yay.
Melbourne's Nick Larkey. We jump to the bench. As I say, I pick one from each: defender, ruckman, midfielder, and forward. Defender, Alir Alir. I'm going to give the defender from the Port Adelaide Power a little bit of love. Melbourne's Brody Grundy. Port Adelaide's Zach Butters is my midfielder, and we discussed him a little bit, so it makes me kind of grin a little bit. GWS's Brent Daniels is the forward on the bench. Thoughts, sir, on this team of the round? Very interesting group of players this week.
I think I was able to write down all the players nearly except one. I think I'm missing one on the center line. You mentioned the wings, Justin McInerney. McInerney has been a really stable piece for the Swans these past couple weeks. Versatile player. I noted him, in a lot of last season or the early part of this season, doing more halfback work. He's pushed forward a bit and remains sure-handed. Good full field disposal there. Who was that? Who were the center? Who was the
Chad Warner, Tim Taranto, and Jordan DeGoey are the three in the
okay.
center square.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm a little surprised that he went in Aisha's direction, but he has rounded into form these past couple weeks. He's been under the pump for the first part of the year. Aish did have a goal from 24 disposals, so I understand the pick there. Obviously,
Yeah, and
you
he's
have to.
bounced back and forth between the halfback line and the wing. I know last round, I think one or two rounds ago, he was actually a wing for Fremantle, so he actually got a wing spot because he had kicked the goal in that, but he had played kind of the halfback role in this particular game, so that's why he got there. Nick Dacos, the guy is absolutely fantastic. When you kick a goal in that Collingwood team, the halfback line sometimes they're probably most attacking, and Mason Redmond is kind of taken over for Nick Hind as that attacking forward style halfback role for Essendon there. So it's an interesting group. The fullback line was the most fun because Nick Blakey usually has been playing a halfback role, but he's been playing the pocket a little bit to kind of help out as the key defender. And this round, he kind of shifted up to the halfback a little bit later in the game once Melican and Francis kind of got Mackay and Curnow kind of corralled a little bit after they got a little bit free, we're just missing shots early in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I like a whole lot of where you're going for. It's hard to immediately see a whole lot of problems with the list that you chose. I mean, I'm just running through the stats for this one, and there aren't a whole lot of players that have stats that jump out as much. I feel bad about Matt Rowell being left out I'll say that. It
It's
was so hard to
it's the
work with the
one it's
midfielders, and
the
he's not the goal kicker.
well,
I mean, he did get one.
he had one, but it's like if I remember correctly, Chad Warner had two, Taranto had four, which I almost put Taranto in the forward line because he had the most goals for Richmond, but he
Yeah,
started in the center
yeah,
mid
player
and
151, right, Kane?
exactly. So I'm like, there's not much I could do there. So two spots were already taken pretty
Yeah,
quickly. And it's like, and then you get down to score involvements, different things like that. And Jordan DeGoey is always he's I think he's benefited from Josh and Nick Dacos's ability to kind of take a little bit of that pressure off him, and
and
he's able
also
to
Tom Mitchell as well, being that guy at the center bounces on the deck,
exactly.
getting those clearances started. As I mentioned earlier, when we're in that 2011 draft class discussion. I mean,
Yep.
if you're looking at the midfielders, the two that I would try to squeeze in there somehow are Matt Rowell and Jack McRae for the Bulldogs, who has been so consistent and
Mhm.
had another very strong showing against the Suns. McRae with 33 disposals, 8 tackles, and 520 meters gained. I mean, Bonapelli is hard to always leave out as well, but perhaps the fact that they lost that game and didn't make the most of some of their opportunities in front of goal
Yep.
sours some opinions there.
Yeah, I
I
mean
mean,
it's subjective. It really is. I
obviously,
love the discussion. Sometimes I put it online, and you get people that literally want to have a discussion over it. And then you get the people that are just you're wrong, and I'm like, okay, well, give me a reason why. And
look, your
then
team's probably better than Campbell Brown's, and I haven't seen his.
I just and I don't just like going off statistics. And like I said, I like having that little bit of the weight on the goals kicked and the scoring involvement, just because I think that I it's one of the things that everybody wants to see. So having that little bit of weight onto that. So and then we jump to what I call power rankings. Ross was huge with these in all of his podcasts before. So as an homage to him, I've keeping it, but I go by form a little bit more than by where they are on the ladder. So there may be a few that'll throw some people off. Surprisingly, so many teams with this upsets in the top part of the ladder have lost. So for one of the few times ever, number 5 is coming off a loss, and that's the Western Bulldogs, because wins in a row. So they have those wins in a row in the bank a little bit. So even with the loss, they're still there. They
Yeah,
jump
6 of 7 coming
exactly.
into this
Yeah,
and did a
exactly.
lot
So
of things right in this game.
yep, and other teams around them had 2 losses or had lost another one with not as much. So Western Bulldogs at 5. Number 4, the Brisbane Lions again. Yes, coming off a loss, but again, a nice little winning streak coming prior. Fremantle jumps into 3rd. Collingwood at number 2, and Port Adelaide is still is back at the top of the power rankings this week. Again, 5 Western Bulldogs, 4 Brisbane Lions, 3 Fremantle Dockers, number 2 Collingwood, and number 1 Port Adelaide again. All by form. Again, I always take off the last 5 games, how they're going, and then how long their winning streak is if we need any tiebreakers. So we jump to it, sir. I know we are very, very early in the early evening here on Sunday. There's still a few days before the next set of games, but I think we should tip the games. So I put this caveat in the video. It is still Sunday here. We are still quite a ways away from the
Yeah,
opening from the
Monday around noontime
exactly
in the Pacific states of
in
Australia
in
as we're
Melbourne.
wrapping this up.
Yeah, so we don't know the injury reports, anything like that. We still don't know whether anything like that. So this is a little bit of a guess. So we'll jump right into it. MCG Friday night, Melbourne v Carlton. Who do you like in this one?
I do like the D's for all the reasons that we didn't like the Blues, and the D's getting Lockie Hunter back as well. That'll be a huge in to solidify the rotations there. Again, I liked a lot of what Angus Brayshaw did defensively on that wing near, which tended to be the wing near the screen, I believe. You can look back and see the positives that he did there, but my birthday ought to start with a D's win.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So we jump to it. Next game of the round. I'm D's as well. I almost forgot my tip. What am I doing? I'm trying to be sure. Like I totally forgot. I usually do my footy tips in it and I plug it in, and I'm sitting here as you're talking. I'm plugging mine in and I'm going, well, that was okay. And I was like, oh yeah, I might want to do my tip. So that's the fun part of podcasting sometimes. Yep. Got the D's in this one, just a little bit too strong again. If Carlton needs to get it figured out, I don't think this is the opponent to do that. To the Adelaide Oval, Hawthorne Hawks, can they get a second upset in a row? Probably not. I like Hinkley at home. I think the Port Adelaide Power fans are going to be up and about. This is going to be a cauldron for the Hawks to go into, and I think the Power get this one, and I think this one could get away from the Hawks just a little bit.
I think this could get away from them as well. I love what Port have managed to do with this young midfield trio of Butters, Rosie, and Horn Francis. It's allowed that older core to work more toward half forward. Trav Boak on the wing has been a nice piece. Wasn't in for this one. They honestly didn't miss him. And if they get even healthier with Charlie Dixon and Todd Marshall coming in, it's going to be some tough list decisions for Ken Hinkley and company. I do like the Power on this one. And looking ahead to the middle game on Saturday, the Eagles will not have that matching against Collingwood again. I was so shocked. I mean, that might have been the result that shocked me the most all of last year when the Eagles beat Collingwood round 4 at Marvel Stadium. I was still in Berkeley at that point. I was finishing up my senior year at Cal, and I think my roommate was out that night, and probably good thing that he was because I was just jumping up at that one. It's not going to happen again. Pies will run him over.
Well, and that was before the Pies went on their magical run at the end of last year. Pies too good, even at Optus Stadium. I think, unfortunately, this could be a stat patter for several of your forwards, as you kind of stated earlier. We jump to it. Marvel Stadium is the Western Bulldogs host the Cats, and I'm fascinated on this one, sir, because I like the Duggies in this one. You'd asked me a few rounds prior to some of the injuries of the midfield, I probably would have tipped you along, but I like the Duggies in here. Good midfield. Tim English coming off a little bit of a sketchy game against Jared Witz. He goes up against Segler. I think he has a huge advantage. I think Timmy English has a big game, which then leads the Bontempellis and the McRaes in them to have just as big a game. Ugle Hagen goes for 5. I think it's a big win. I think the Duggies put a statement on the Cats in this one.
I think they do as well. If you didn't realize what the Cats midfield was lacking before the middle game this past Saturday, you saw it. And I agree. It'll be Tim English will have the dominant game, whether it's against Segler or whoever, whether they do get Sam Naismith in the midseason draft and try to put him in right away. It's Tim English. He's the All-Australian ruck. He is the most versatile, ruck in the competition in an age where we're seeing more tall players who aren't necessarily, cast as that typical I hit ball guy, taking those ruck roles. English is such a capable player all over the ground. He's one of my favorites to watch, and it's a shame that as a Westerner, he's locked up for so long.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there was a while that many in the West were hoping Tim English would find his way back west, but unfortunately,
hopefully Harry Barnett matures into a really likable player there. I hope that he's able to get his first opportunity at AFL level soon.
Yeah, let's jump back to Darwin as this. I think this game got a few more eyeballs after this last week. Is back in TO Stadium again at Darwin, Gold Coast again, hosting the Adelaide Crows. I'm very, very intrigued by this one. Who's got your fancy in this one? Because I think this has turned into a game that might be you can't miss type of game.
And I'm sad that this game will not be on US like standard US TV. You got the Dogs and Cats on Fox Sports 2, and I would have loved for at least one of these Darwin games to get the American TV time to see just the amazing scenes there in the top end. Yeah. I do like the Crows in this one at this point. They're with the health they have and what they managed to do against the Lions this past week. It's going to be a tough task for a side that's still very young on the longest oval in the comp in the heat. I could see this game going either way. Right now, I'm going with the majority of the tippers on this game, and I'm going with the Crows. Where do you stand, Coach?
I'm going to go with the Crows, and it's not about the players. It's not about the coaching. Really? I think it's going to be about conditioning because, as they said, it was 27 degrees Celsius, very warm at the top end as they played the Duggies. And that is not always something that you recover with super quick. Can they recover put the moisture, put the fluids back in their bodies, because you're coming up against a fresh Adelaide team that's going to have been played in cooler weather. They won't have as much strength. They didn't have as much stress on their bodies coming up to play. Yes. Will it take a little bit of time for the Crows to get used to the warmth that is Darwin? Yes, which may give the Gold Coast early, but I think come fourth quarter, I think the legs get a little weary, and I think that's when the Crows capitalize. Crows win this. I think this comes down to the fourth quarter. This is going to be a cracking game. This could be game of the round.
I would love for this to be game of the round. And looking at the forecast for this coming Saturday in Darwin, it's going to be very similar conditions. Looks like it's going to be in the high 70s Fahrenheit, the mid to high 20s Celsius, and pretty dry around bounce time again. So something to watch for there. I guess we're moving on to. Geez, it feels weird seeing only two Sunday games, and I mean, I'm so sad still that the two biggest games of the round are overlapping
Yeah,
in
that is
Dogs
tough.
Cats and Suns Crows. It means I'll be the one focusing on the Gold Coast game, and I'll have a lot to say in our round 12 recap on my end. But
Definitely for
I
sure.
mean, looking at the Giants and the Tigers there at the showground.
Mhm.
This is another really, really tough one to tip. It's going to be Tim Torano and, well, not Jacob Hopper because he's hurt, but Torano's return against the Giants. There should be some heat in this game. Where do you stand?
I'm I've bounced back and forth on this one. Actually, this is one of those where I kind of I agree. I've went with this a few times, and I don't know why I do this, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm gonna go Richmond on this one, because sometimes when you get that massive win, that win that most people didn't expect you to win, sometimes you have a little bit of a let off. Richmond, I think, because of Dimma's abruptness, and kind of there was some unrest due to kind of the things that went on. I don't want to get into that particular thing since that happened last week. I think Richmond will kind of pull it together. They played a pretty good game against Port. They just ran into a good team. You get to go on the road. You can bring everybody together, kind of bring the group and make that cohesion again. And I think you come up against the GWS team that kind of they use a lot of energy to beat a good Cats team that may see them wane a little bit come next round. So I'm going to tip Richmond in this one.
Man, I think we've agreed on every single game, which is kind of boring. I am also tipping the Tigers. I think there's no way they could be even less accurate in front of goal than they were in the second quarter. They found some things that work as of late. They're getting healthier as well, and I mean, I will really look forward to seeing the battle in the ruck between Kieran Briggs and Toby Nankervis
Mhm.
in this contest. I do think the Giants will fall back a little bit in this one. It's going to be a tough battle in the midfield, and I think Richmond's pace will could leave the Giants exposed on the rebound with how quickly they like to bring numbers up the ground themselves. So I do like Richmond in this one. Are we going to be 7 for 7 agreeing on these with
I'm
the
for,
like with yeah, we
unless
have to be.
somebody's going to take the flyer on North Melbourne, I think most likely Essendon v North Melbourne again. Essendon has kind of regressed a little bit. I think again that's you're not always going to be able to just ride the high that was the early part of the season. The new coach bounce, as some would say, but this is one of those. Draper had a little bit of a down game. We'll have to see how he goes. Him and Goldstein is going to be fascinating because both are very athletic. They like to get up and down the field. I just think when it comes to it, Essendon has more firepower going forward. North has Larkey, and then it gets a little muddy. There's not as much um, sure-handed where you've got Stringer, you've got McDonald, Tippin, Woody, you've got Wiedemann. So there's a little bit more I trust on the Essendon side than I do North Melbourne here. I think North stays in this. They're going to be that scrappy team that they're going to be in this. I think Essendon win it. I don't think it's by more than about 4 goals max. I think North stays in this. Essendon just a little bit too good though.
Yeah, I'm tipping Essendon as well in this one. Also, just realized this will be Brad Scott's first game coaching against North, so
Mhm.
that'll be fun there. I mean, I know not a huge number of pieces there in multiple ways. When in terms of the playing group and the coaching staff from his time there, but yeah, North's goal kicking depth is going to be a bit iffy compared to what the Bombers have. In terms of the rucks, I think you'll see Andrew Phillips coming back into this one as well. He was a late out against the Eagles, and understandably so. I think those two going up against Todd Goldstein, and I guess Callum Coleman-Jones would be the second ruck.
Mhm.
I'd like them to be able to at least draw even there. And yeah, I think the other thing with North, I really like Jaden Stevenson this past week, and he has a tough time stringing together consecutive good games, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, he's super talented, but just everything has kind of went haywire since everything kind of went down at Collingwood for sure. So, well, Ben, that is going to do it for our episode today. Again, you, like many of the footy heads over here, we get talking and it's so much fun. I lose track of time. It's such a fascinating conversation. Again, I have to say this, when you talk to Ethan, please, you guys' podcast is fantastic. It's a listen for sure. I love that I can connect with and chat with more and more of American footy podcasters. It's so good to work with you. I'm still in working with it. I'm trying to get a hold of Rosanna to where we can maybe do a mega pod with Craig. I think it'd be fascinating for us to just chat footy for the 4 podcasts that are here in the States with AFL Obsessed, Yank on the Footy, Donnie's Disposals, and Americans Watching the Footy. What do you think?
I would love that. I'd love for that to happen at some point. I think that finals bye would be a great time to see if we could get it together then. That would be a spectacular one to be able to a big finals preview. Just to I guess plug myself and my brother. Again, we are Americans Watching the Footy. The WTF in the acronym was very intentional on Ethan's part. he thought of that from the beginning because 3+ years ago, that was what we thought about the sport when we first saw it round 1 of 2020. So we're on Twitter and YouTube at Americans Footy. You can find our live reactions to games there, as well as for YouTube, links to our podcast episodes, some shorts that I'm getting together as well. And also over these next couple rounds, we're going to have an extra episode per week in addition to our preview and recap, because we're going to do progress reports for each of the teams on their buys. And with your Swans being one of the first up, we're going to be getting into them. We'll be recording that Monday night here in the States, so hopefully that'll be up Wednesday Australian time, Tuesday US time.
Fantastic. Can't wait to hear that for sure. But I'll tell you this though. If you ever want to talk women's footy, please reach out, let me know. I love talking to women, have a few connections there. So I know you guys are super busy. I know Ethan does a lot of his sports reporting, but if you ever want to get into the women's space, please reach out. I'd love to help you guys out.
Absolutely.
Get started there. So
I do need to get more into the women's game with the Eagles, obviously having a side there, and obviously now being a full comp. One of my big missions for these next couple years is to get more into the women's game as well. So I'll definitely reach out to you for that, Coach.
Trust me, it is worth it. It is very, very much worth it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode today. Again, Ben, thank you very much. We will be back again very, very soon with more footy coverage. Remember, AFL, AFLW, and of course, State League coverage here on Donnie's Disposal.
Here's the song. Arms in the air. Donnie's gone through. Jamie Elliott has won the game of footy for this famous club. The legend becomes immortal. Smith at his pocket, Ken shake.